Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for signing in today. Appreciate you joining us. We are here to talk about commercial space activities. In short, getting somebody else to pay for it. Kind of important and an interesting topic, and I think that's reflected in the number of you that have signed up for today's session. My name is Jonathan Yakasha from Tech Connect. I'll be the host today for a conversation with Rich and Yvonne. We're going to be taking your questions later on during today's chat. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to pop them into the Q&A chat box. We'll definitely reserve some time for your questions. We've got some already, and that's great. We'll get to those in just a little bit. Right now, though, I'm going to have Rich and Yvonne introduce themselves, and then we'll get into our conversation. Yvonne, why don't we start with you?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jonathan. I appreciate being here. And I'm Yvonne Gamble, CEO for Sanpete Financial Group. We're a VC firm, and our area is in Terran activities for infrastructure and space infrastructure activities. We do funding on two tracks. On our general is from 50 million to 120 billion, and then our foundation actually does the space innovation, and that can be anywhere from 25,000, up into 50, 60 million, depending on what the needs are.
Great, thanks, Yvonne. Rich, your turn.
I'm Rich Julian from Vaca Holdings. We are a national security focused investor focused on national security for the US, the UK, and Australia, otherwise known as AUKUS these days. When we talk about national security, we mean the broadest sense of the world. So energy resilience, sustainability, epidemiological challenges, anything that impacts the national security of those countries is areas we focus on. And obviously, space is a huge component of national security for the U.S. and its close allies.
All right, great. Thank you very much for both of those introductions. For our attendees, hopefully that gives you kind of a flavor of the interests and areas of expertise for these two panelists. With that, we're going to get to a couple of scripted questions just to get everybody situated. We're going to start with kind of a broad spectrum question for both of you. Why is investing in space tech particularly exciting right now? Who'd like to start us off?
I'll take a stab at that. When you think about innovation and you think about the next frontiers and what I'm going to do, when I come out of college, or how am I going to expand my business, space is really your next essential place that we can actually get into for a number of reasons. For what's going on here, on the planet with climate change, we need to go deeper into our exploration of space, so that we're looking to basically do off-world activities through colonization, through just deeper exploration. So we have to really understand what's out there, and more importantly, we have to actually design what we have so that we can actually live, work, and play in space. I know that sounds very simplistic, but that takes a lot to actually do that. When you're talking about doing something that's not here, on the planet where you reside, but you're actually now trying to build and develop for something that is outside of where you are.
Great. Rich, anything to add?
So I look at the space industry today the way the cell phone market was in, call it, the early 2000s, right? At that time, the only people who made any money in cell phones were people who actually made handsets or people who sold you cell services. With the advent of smartphones, you started seeing other industries pop up around the cell phone market. And now most of the people who are making the money off of it are in the data world. They're leveraging that as a platform to deliver services to people. Those services are where all the real money is today. In fact, most cell phone manufacturers and most of the people who provide cell phone services make very low profit margins, right? So there's not a lot coming out of that. I see the space industry as in that area too, right? Thanks to SpaceX and some of the other launch companies, launch is becoming more ubiquitous and available. You've got base platforms being put out in space. You've got the ground stations being proliferated around the world. So the market's at that tipping point where you can bring new concepts, approaches, and utilization of assets in space to deliver fundamental values on the ground. whether those are data services, capabilities that you're delivering off of it, or even deep space exploration, mining, pick all those wonderful concepts we have. It's becoming the infrastructural components that Yvonne mentioned. Those pieces that you need before you can move to the next ring out and the next ring out are starting to be put in place. So we've hit that inflection point where companies can start making money off of the data they're putting into space, the data they're pulling from space,
Mhm.
capabilities in space. We're even getting to the point where in space manufacture is becoming realistic, if not viable.
Okay. And Rich, you kind of anticipated my next question here, so thank you very much for that. The next question is, what do you see as the current landscape of space tech investments, particularly in LEO? How do you see that evolving over the next couple of years?
I think that you're going to see a lot of, well, so there's a real problem right now in that there's a plethora of companies that have built around great technologies and great capabilities with not necessarily commensurate business models. And so there are a lot of companies that are struggling to find their footings and become an established and viable business. So I really do see in the market, you're going to see a lot of consolidation, whether that's mergers within companies who realize better together, or acquisitions, or partnership opportunities. And unfortunately, I also see the potential for a lot of companies to fail out, but this is true of any new market we open, right? Anytime you open up a new market, you always go through this kind of upflux, downflux, and you get this kind of breathing in and out of the market. I think that's going to happen in the next couple of years. The good news is the capabilities have caught up with people's concepts now. So now there is the ability to do some of the things that people could only plan in the past. And also, there's enough interest from both the investment and the consumption side of the business that you can actually build viable businesses. But I think that you're going to now start seeing it moving away from people who were just a great idea and take technology and capability to people who have well planned and designed business models that will allow them to become a long-standing business concern.
Yvonne, what about your perspective?
Uh, on that, kind of piggybacking on what Rich is saying, he's absolutely spot on. Where as we actually go into the space industry, one of the things that you're going to really see a lot more of, when you do come in with those good business plans, those good models, but it's problem solving. And that's what many of the innovators really need to be looking at. Everybody's coming up with these excellent, ideas, but some of them are, a little out there, or maybe they don't necessarily solve an immediate problem. One of the immediate problems that we don't see a lot of people actually trying to address is space junk. We have a lot of space debris around the planet, and it is falling onto the Earth every single day. These are old satellites, that were put into place, and now we're trying to, with many of the new low LEO, the low Earth orbiting satellite, different types of things that are coming in, especially with communications, and we want to move into 6G. Well, we can't do that efficiently and effectively until we get some of that junk out of the way. That's right there. That is right for a company to come in, develop technology, with a grappling arm, move that out of the way, what have you, bring it back. You could even smelt that down and maybe, find new usages, to recycle some of that material that's there. So that's a problem solving. So a lot of what we're doing is we have to think of it in these terms. When we think about innovation and building, generally we're thinking about, oh, that's something new. Like Rich spoke about earlier when we talked about the cell phone industry. That was something new that was coming in, something we didn't have, now we want to have. Well, what we have to think about is this. It's real simple. Look at what we have here on Earth, and think about in terms of replicating what we have in space, being able to do that in space. The manufacturing, that's our next level that we go into, being able to build a manufacturing plant in space and then manufacture right there the different components we need, spaceships, launch vehicles, whatever that we need, mobility vehicles for on the ground, We can do that in space. So when we start thinking about what I might develop or what needs to be developed, start thinking in terms of what problems are we actually going to solve? The first and foremost type things, the same thing we would do if we thought about we wanted to build a brand new city. If we wanted to go to a new land and build a brand new city in Antarctica, now we're going to build a whole city, what would we need? Think about it in that spectrum, and then it'll make more sense what is going to actually hold out and what's actually going to actually go through. And I like what Rich was saying, and I think that's something that the audience should really pick up on, and that is as you're going through into a new area, new frontier, think about those collaborations because you're not going to get there just simply being a singular company or singular entity. You're going to need to form collaborative partnerships. However those partnerships may look. Some people may stay the course. With those partnerships, some may not. Through an acquisition or what have you. But you need to think about this as a collaborative effort and not just a I me self effort.
Okay.
I want to
So,
definitely put a pin in that. Right?
yeah,
It is all about partnerships. If you're an emerging company or a startup going into this, you are not a solution. Solutions are put together by huge prime contractors that have thousands of component pieces going into it. What you are is could be is a critical piece of those solutions. So finding those partners that you can work with to deliver the full solution, whether it's a launch provider, a bus manufacturer, all the way down to your substrate manufacturer, finding those partnerships and helping you put together what is a compelling solution for moving forward, that's really how you get yourself moving forward. And that partners could be one of the major players. It could be another small player that you resonate really well with. And it comes down to being able to create capability while reducing risk. Those words, create capability, reduce risk, resonate with investors more than anything else. You reduce the risk to my investment until there's a failure going into it, and the resonance almost always equals revenue. So those models will fit very well to each other. And I love that the tap to space junk because a lot of this space junk is literally rare earth minerals that are floating around that we launched that have broken apart. Probably could find some additional use to that rather than burning it up in the atmosphere. And the final one that I'll add into that is I'm becoming more interested in not orbits. LEO and VLEO are very interesting but saturated. The ability to move between orbits, so the ability to in space maneuver and possibly shift and change within that, which goes along with in space servicing and in space support, that's really where people can make really big investment and success because so many other people have made the investments. If you can help them extend the life of those investments, you have an immediate market that's available to you.
I've got a question that I was going to ask, but I'm actually going to put a pin in it for a little bit because you guys have kind of tapped into space junk. We got a comment saying that it really needs to be a political solution. To what extent do you two feel that commercial space entities can help push the needle on the government side to get government agencies domestically, but also internationally, to see the value in addressing space junk?
Well, if you're looking and thinking and saying, really what it's going to come down to is this. Not to say that it shouldn't be political or politicized or what have you, but it'll come down to who put it up there. That's one who should be responsible to bring it down. And if they're not going to be the one to bring it down, then they need to hire someone to do so. And so therefore, I don't see necessarily, unless all of the junk that's up there, belongs to, one government or another, then of course it's not necessarily political. It's you put it up there, you go up there and get it, or you hire somebody to go up there and get it for you. So you don't need to get into because really what we don't want to create is when you start politicizing different things or what have you, then it could stay up there for years, fighting a political battle and who's in office at that time. No, the fact is, like Rich is saying, we're trying to get in and to do more, and even to do more even in between the different levels that are out there. So we don't really have time to sit up here and go back and forth and quibble over who's this or who's that. We need to get up there and get that stuff down. And I would really even feel better if you had a third party, company, the conglomerate that went together, or two or three companies that went together, develop something, and go up there and could take down all that for everyone.
Look, I think that everybody recognizes the problem. It all comes down to people are like, well, who should pay for it? And that's what it all comes down to within space junk.
Hmm.
And then what do you do with that space junk once you collect it, right? So that is a portion of it. But I think commercial companies are well positioned to support this across countries because countries have unique focus areas, whereas commercial industry has a tendency to work in multiple countries at the same time and partner across countries. So the ability to bring it to the attention of more than one government and to try to drive support from more than one government, those are the kinds of things that start having impact. And so commercial industry is in a unique position because you've got a part of your launch team in India and part in Australia, and you're partnered with US, you've got a Canadian company in your conglomerate, and you're working with SpaceX, and all of these pieces that can start having an impact more broadly with governments to get them to, if not do the work, get out of the way of the people who want to do the work.
Let's do the
To
work.
Yvonne.
Okay. So conversation thus far has kind of been commercial space at a macro level. Let's turn it to a micro level. Yvonne, you talked about looking for companies that are looking to solve a really good problem. And Rich, you said you're looking for companies that have the wherewithal and the foresight to try to make new connections with other organizations to help them achieve their goals. Um, Besides those two things, what else are you two looking for in early stage space companies? Well, like what kind of characteristics, what kind of attributes are you looking for when considering whether or not investing in a company?
What I
I'd
look
be
for,
shocked if the two of us didn't say the same thing. Literally, I'd be shocked.
I mean,
It's the
shots. Okay.
team. Yeah, it's the team. It's the tech. It's the partners and the customers, or who's going to be the consumer of it. That's what you're looking for.
Hmm. Yeah, that's it, Jonathan. I mean, because the team we really look at, if just want to kind of dig into it and give the audience something, the reason why we look so hard at the team is because we got to look at the longevity of what you're trying to develop, how that's going to be. And we're looking at, how knowledgeable are they? Is that person? How flexible are they to pivot? When you're talking about developing something or you're trying to build a company, that sort of thing, it's not going to just go in a straight line. It's going to take the same wave, just as a voice wave would carry. And that's the up and down. That's how it's going to go. And hopefully it stays on an upward trajectory in doing so. But we got to look at that team and see, can they stand the long haul? What can they do? The tech. Is this, does this tech really make sense, or is this just kind of drawing board napkin tech? I think, I wonder, I hope, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're going to look very deep into that due diligence. And trust me, VCs, they might look at myself or Rich and say, okay, fine, you're not astronauts, you're not in the space program, what have you, you know, but the fact is, we don't have to be. We have the space program behind us. We have the DoD. We have all these different areas that we can just make a phone call, 10 digits, dial in and say, hey, look at this, push the button, click, tell me what do you think? Is this going to work, or is this, just a pie in the sky? So we very, very quickly, a VC can get an answer back while you're just sitting there at the table with them on whether or not that's going to work. That's got to. And then do you have consumers? Who's going to buy this? Who is actually going to buy this? I have one VC, one investor group, and basically that's all they look at. They said, fine, is they want to see who the customers are. They'd be, even before they look at the team, before they look at the tech, they want to see who are their customers, and have we talked to their customers? What's the assurance that you can give me that these people are actually going to buy this?
All right, Rich, how'd she do?
No, and I totally agree. I mean, look, for any investor, it's all about managing risk, right? So the diligence we put into it really does look at the team. Do they have the capability here? Do they have the flexibility in the team? You never want to see a team that is all one thing, right? You want to see kind of that flexibility on that team. It's not just about the technology and what they're proposing for it, but what are the potential alternatives that those technologies can do? Because we know in technology what you expect it to do, it never actually does, right? It always goes down. You learn as you develop the technologies. So, can you see other potential ways of making that? And especially for people who are looking at some of the deep techs that have to be out there, they're looking at mining on asteroids. Right? It's going to be years before we can get there. Do you have secondary uses of that technology that could be applied today to other challenges that are out there. Understanding that you want to build a mining thing for space, great. We want to see that occur too. But is there something you can deliver with it today so you can prove out the technology, so you can potentially make some revenue while you're proving out that technology? And so you've demonstrated its viability and capability at the same time you're moving the ball forward to where you really need it to be at.
So would you say that those secondary use cases, that's kind of one of your major tools for um, evaluating slash mitigating risks when investing in a space tech company?
Sure, I mean it's a way of reducing the risk in that, but it also a technology with a single application or use is very limited. And the limitations that it faces when you have it for that singular use is that use doesn't pan out exactly the way you were intending it to occur.
Right.
The timelines don't line up with that, which means you can be sitting there for a period of time up to years with no ability to go into it. If you have to wait for a satellite lander to be put out there to land on an asteroid, you may not get to the technology you want, and by the time it gets there, maybe your technology has been surpassed. So anything you can do to demonstrate that, the defense community talks about dual use. I hate the term. Nobody wants two uses. They want multi-use. But definitely the ability to have multiple uses to your technology or multiple applications of that same technology reduces the risk.
Okay. Um, what are there any other kind of key ways that you guys look for to eliminate or at least be aware of the risks when funding a company? Yvonne, did you want to chime in there?
I'm going to let Rich take that one. I may need to go off camera for one moment.
Sure, not a problem. Rich, go ahead.
I think the other piece about that is you have to dig into the business of the company and their approach to the business, right? What does the ownership structure and things look like within that? Because that tells you how the company is going to survive in here, right? Do they actually have a model that will allow them to sell their capability to whether it's a third party vendor, whether it's directly to a prime contractor, whether it's to a government customer or into a commercial industry, right? They have to have a way of transitioning the capability they've developed into an actual market viability. And so the other piece I like to dig into with companies is okay, so if someone was going to buy your stuff, how do they buy it? Where do they buy it at? What does a buyer look like? Understanding that piece going into it, that business viability in many deep tech companies, that can be ignored as they're getting started because they're so focused on this technology that they're so invested in solving these huge problems. But
Hmm.
that making sure that there is a realistic business that can go into that, that is just as important from an investor standpoint so that I'm not just throwing money into something. There's actually an endpoint and a return. You have to remember that investors are in it to make money, right?
Right.
You may find an investor that's willing to extend that time frame out and give you time to develop truly groundbreaking technologies. But in the end, they have to answer to their investors as well, right? And so there is a need to show that there is a viable path to at least break even, more importantly, to show some kind of profitability over time that will return that. It might not be for years. Again, I'll use the satellite. for mining on asteroids, example. It might not be for years, but I can actually see the end state there because we know that is a valid resource that's available. We just have to get
Great. Yvonne, welcome back.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
yes, thank you. I just wanted to kind of chime in with that and say that one of the models that you're going to see more and more in the investment world to kind of take on to actually address specifically the space research and development area. More times than not, most of the your standard VCs were not necessarily into foundation type funding, creating a foundation, so that they could then go ahead on and develop, put something into research and development, which does take, like Rich said, it takes years to do those types of things. So we're looking at that 20, maybe 20, 30 years before that's actually fully developed and really returning, the necessary profits. So what that's one of the things that many of the VC are going to are beginning to look at and are going to have to be actually funding out of some of their funds. That's why, when I stated at the top of the program that we do two tracks. One track is our standard VC, look for a rate of return in that 5-7 year period time frame, and then the other is the foundation type, more as where we can actually then take on that research and development timeline, which is a longer timeline, and that may have something. We do like to mitigate even the risk there, and have some usage that, here on Earth, that, they can have something or have other usage, for the type of technologies that they're trying to develop to. But because it is a research and development fund that is actually funding them, then its whole purpose is to be in there for the, for the long term as opposed to the short term.
You guys are on fire today. Yvonne, you just answered a question that came in that I was anticipating as a follow up for you, but you already answered it. So thank you very much for that. For anybody else, I think I see one hand up on the display here. If you've got a question, please go ahead and submit it via the Q&A box, and we'll get to attendee questions in just a little bit. So thank you very much for that. Okay. Uh, Within commercial space, are there specific sectors that you guys see as by investors? Are there specific areas that you guys are looking for right now?
Medical, biometrics, um, you're talking about anything, obviously having to do with disease abatement, all those different types of things. And why is this so important? Well, obviously we're millions of miles away from one another. So if we can have the medical, the suits, the clothing that they have, and now we can actually track what the biometrics of someone, when they are, these long distances away out in space, or, across the world or what have you, we can actually check them, or, even in the neighborhood. So that is something that could be utilized, in clothing, just for people, the general population, as well as, for space applications. The medical one that's very, very extremely important. I was just having a conversation earlier today with a company that is looking, for funding, and that is doing something where it has to be. We don't know what type of pathogens that we're going to run into out in space. We do everything that we can to try to avoid and abate that, but what we do know is that we will be running into pathogens, and so we really do need, something in place to try to avoid and abate that. And then when that does happen, we need to be ready for that. And we saw when the COVID strain, when that virus strain came right here on Earth. Now, what happens when we are actually integrating, just in and around our planet, going back and forth, sending satellites up, bringing satellites back, and some pathogen is, is on that satellite. So we need to be able to have those things in place and ready to go. So something like that's where you see that interchange and that interplay between what happens on Earth and what happens in space.
Thank you, Yvonne.
And
Rich.
also all really good examples of that dual use nature of it, right? Because if we're developing that for space, they still have application for it here and now. We need improved medical device and medical, for remote medical support. We need pathogen detection. There's all kinds of pieces there. So I think that fits well. I look at kind of anything that's sustainability for space. And by sustainability, I mean things like in space manufacture, maintenance, maneuver, refueling, all the pieces of that. That area is huge. Risk reduction. So space domain awareness, actually knowing what's where, when, why, and how is really important as we get more and more stuff in space. Space junk is bad enough, but when you start putting people and more people-driven stuff out there, or heaven forbid, when someone is putting up nuclear powered stuff up there, let's make sure we're not having collisions. But that goes into debris removal, mitigation, reuse, etc. And the enhanced comms and sensors. That's really kind of technology. Most of the sensor technology we're using today was developed 20 to 50 years ago. And now we're beginning to see some of these newer sensors, newer communication mechanisms come and pop up here. But in space communication between far flung locations, from Lagrange points all the way out to extraterrestrial bodies we're working on, communications within constellations, so between the satellites that are up there, and changing this model we've always had of uplink, downlink to being continuously connected because there's always somebody over the downlink. Those next generation comms technologies are huge. And oh, by the way, have a huge market for them, right, today. And that market will only continue to grow.
Okay. We've got a number of questions that have come in. I can again see a couple of hands up. If you've got your hands up because you've got a question, please submit them via the Q&A box. We will get to them momentarily. And I do want to get to questions that are coming in from the attendees, so we'll get to those in just a minute. In the last little bit here before we turn to attendee questions, what advice do you both have for commercial space entrepreneurs that are looking to, get their technology noticed and really make their mark on the industry, on the world?
I would say, I tell everyone, you need to develop a 100-year plan on if you're going to go into business, you're going to develop a technology, or you're going to do something outside of, just staying at home sitting on the couch. And the reason why you need a 100-year plan is you need to be able to look at this over the course of time and what is the impact that it's going to have? What is the impact it's going to have on the earth when you develop it, on space, on consumers, on users, on the planet itself? What is that impact? When you begin to look at that over such a long period span of time, you also begin to look at yourself and you begin to look at where will I be? Where do I want to be? Do I just want to make something and then sell it in 3 to 5 years? Do I want to collaborate with someone? Would that be the best way for me to go? And you begin to look and ask yourself these types of questions, get with your team, what have you, and then you begin to kind of dissect that. Because when you go in and you start talking to the VC and we start going through due diligence, we have a 30-point due diligence checklist. And more times than not, when our innovators come to us, they cannot get through that entire checklist of things. They haven't looked at it, they haven't thought about it. And these are the
Or the
types of
first five things, right?
the first five the first five things of it they can't get through it. And so they're so basically, what happens is it gives us pause, to say, has this person really thought well or delved into this? What is your succession plan? Who's going to succeed you in your business? We all think of that exit strategy. I'm going to become an IPO. I'm going to sell this off for billions of dollars. What happens if that doesn't happen? What happens if it outlives you, or if you have to live and something happens to you and now you can't function in the manner in which you were functioning? How is your business going to operate? Have you thought about that? Not just think about, yes, you have to think about these things in addition to the technology, in addition to, what monies you might make. So yes, if you start thinking in terms of what is my 100-year plan, and you begin to fill in those blanks, then it will make sense when Rich or myself are really digging in and asking you questions, and you're like, why do they need to know that? You'll already understand why, and you'll have the answers to those questions.
If that's daunting, give me a 20-year plan. Um, now, look, Rich's rule number one for engaging with this community, and this applies to everything, whether you're talking about talking to investors, working partnerships, talking to customers, or even building your own staff over time. Do your homework. Understand the people you're talking to. Understand their thesis. Know what current investments they've already made. Know the kinds of things that are there. Identify how you synergize. Don't go in and talk about a company that you're better than only to find out that they invested in you. Talk about a competitor to that person there. Talk about how you can work with things they're already investing in or extend out capabilities they have here. Differentiate, differentiate, differentiate. Why you and not someone else? Why do you have what it takes to go into that? If you haven't done that homework up front, you're wasting both of our time, and you're going to come in here and potentially break the trust with that person. You're going to say something that goes against what they're doing here, or where their stated theses
Mhm.
are and how they think about stuff. Most investors, you get one chance at them, right? You get one chance to get in there and really give them a good pitch to it. Don't waste it because you didn't take the time to do the homework. Same thing when you're bringing on a critical staff member. If this person's critical to you moving forward, learn about them. Go search them out on LinkedIn. Find out from people who are there. Make sure you close that deal with them. So in all of these cases, doing that homework gets into it. And that fits my corollary number two, Rich's rule number two, which is what's in it for me, right? You need to be able to push out to that person, even if what's in it for the person you're talking to is a vision that you're sharing them for a 100-year plan. You've got to sell them on why this is in their interest. It's not about you and your company and your technology. It's about selling to them how this fits the vision that they're going to invest in. Especially if
Mhm.
it's a low or slow return on that investment, you really need to sell them on to, I know we can achieve this over time because fill in the blank.
So it really comes down to, if you synergize both of your answers here, it's it's telling effectively an epic story about your company and your technology, persuading them that there's something interesting in it to continue reading on, but also that you've got the vision for where it's starting out, what it's going to be like in the middle, and what it's going to be like at the end.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
All right, great. All right, so folks, we've got a little over 20 minutes here. I've got some questions coming in. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. So one of the questions that came in during the registration process, do you all have any insights in how VC funding opportunities might align with tech transfer offices out of universities?
Out of We deal with a lot of tech transfer coming out of NASA and out of the DoD, and and I would and universities, most certainly it's probably some of the same types of coming out in the same methodologies. We like that because it's proven tech, and we liked it because we do a lot, funding with NASA, with the DoD. So we know that they've already looked at it, or they're willing to look at it, and so they've kind of underwritten it. So when you have something like that, and you can get a license to do it, that gives you a leg up. Because then, as far as what you're doing, at least, when you come in, we've got some bit of assurance that this is actually has been validated, at least one third of the way.
It's all about resources, right? And the hardest resource to find is people. The next hardest resource to find is solid IP. Universities are and labs, the national labs and the research labs are all fantastic places for that. You want talent, universities generate a lot of talent. If you want IP, they've done a lot of foundational mathematical physics, all of the
Mhm.
work going into it, because the government gives them a lot of money to do those things. So it's a great source. It is just one of those pieces that's out there, and I consider them really to be a partner. I like to see technology companies that have a tie to potentially the university they came or where they're affiliated with, because it gives them kind of that longer legs over time. They'll have that connection to it. As Yvonne mentioned, if you've got a 100-year plan, having that long-term partner, universities are great for that, is really valuable.
Okay. Our next question, and I actually think we've probably touched on this a little bit, is the chicken and the egg here. In order to get VC funding, you've got to be able to, in a lot of cases, show that you've gotten some revenue. But you can't get the revenue until you get your tech done, which is why you need the funding in the first place. Um, Both of you have talked about how early stage companies looking for funding can persuade VCs to fork over some of that funding, having that long term plan, having that vision for what they want to do. Is that really the answer there? You have to be able to vision
It's
for
do
what
your
they want
homework
to do.
again, right, John? It's do your homework,
Do your
right?
work. Do your
There
homework.
is a lot of things you can do before you get to venture capital,
Okay.
right? So there's everything from non-dilutive funding through government grants and programs, university grants, local grants. There's all kinds of things you can get there. There's angel investors. There's other people that are out there before you get to the institutional VC investors. So as you're going through that, if you've demonstrated a path and a vision, you're bringing in that stuff, you're getting some of that pieces, it makes the conversation with the VC when you realize, look, I'm going to need to raise some serious money to get to where I want
Right.
to go next. And
Mhm.
the challenge for the space industry is a lot of these technologies are really, really cost intensive to get the first capability rolled out. The VC community recognizes that. But they want to see that you've leveraged, at least identified and tapped into some of those resources before you get to them. It lowers their risk if you've already been able to leverage some non-dilutive funding in a grant or an STTR. When you get to the VC, you've reduced that risk, and investors are all about reducing that risk, especially if you're going to be presenting to them a long-term, slow return program. They're happy to do that if they see the vision and that you've taken the steps to get to where they are.
Yvonne, I've seen some enthusiastic head shakes from you. So anything you want to add
Definitely,
to it?
definitely. Rich is spot on with that. If one thing that the audience, one of the greatest takeaways I want you to understand, if you see how Rich and I, what we are saying in all of this, this is literally quantum entanglement is what this is. We're talking on the quantum level, meaning that everything is connected and that this is really what you should be thinking about doing. How do I connect the dots? Who am I connected to? Who am I associated with? And basically what the VC wants to see when you come to the VC, you think we're the end of the financial cycle as far as you cycling up to get the funding you need to do your project or to launch your business. And we want to see, have you been able to make friendlies? Have you been able to, raise capital? Who do you have? What companies are working with you? Because many companies, you as Rich has already talked about, you may go to a company and work for that company or bring your product to them and be a part, be a piece of that. Most certainly, like if you look at the distributor cap, what is that to the engine? And, somebody makes the distributor cap, somebody else makes the piston, somebody else makes the spark plugs. But all those things go into it and they go into every single vehicle, whether that's a car, train, a plane, a rocket ship, all those same piece parts. The little substrate that keeps the metal from touching side to side when it's actually going down. That's going into every moving piece of machine. So that's may be what your technology is. So therefore, you need to be talking to the industry. So, how do you talk to the industry? That's when you actually do your homework and you find out who is the industry, who's in my industry. I'm going to make a widget. What is this widget made up of? How many people does it take to make this? And go and talk to those people who are providing you with or who would be your providers. So to make that, and then you say, I have an idea. You may pitch it out to that particular company that's already up and running, and they'll say, fine, and they will give you monies. These are the types of things that you have to do. You've got to learn how to connect the dots and do that at that quantum level. And then when you do rise up to the point where you get to that VC, that end level, we are that end level. Many people they think of venture capital and they get all excited and they want to run here because the money's big, the amounts are big. But this is also because you have actually grown up to this point. You have gotten it, you have developed your company, you have developed your offering, you have developed your services, you have developed you know who your customers are, you have developed you don't come to us with a minimum viable product and then say, fine, I want you to put $30 million into this minimum viable product. That's not going to happen. I'm just telling you that, this is the cold hard truth, the cold hard facts. You come to us when that product has been sold to somebody, or somebody has given you a contract to say, I will purchase this from you if you develop it, because that contract is also going to state at what stage they're going to buy it from you in. And we're going to read that. So we're going to know just how much further you might have to go to get that before it's sold. That's what we do as venture capitalists. So we're just trying to help you to connect the dots so that you are ready to talk to us when you come.
100%. I think that the last piece and one of the biggest problems I've seen with companies when they come and pitch us, give me the so what to, right? You're asking me for $20 million. What is that $20 million going to be used for? And how is it going to help you achieve those end state goals and objectives, that vision you're showing us? Make sure you are very clear about, I'm asking for this to do these things, and this is how it's going to progress me down the path. Because you're not just selling the vision of where you're going, but where the money that you're raising is going to go to help you achieve that. Ensuring that you're doing that, not just I need $20 million and coming into it, and we're going to move the ball forward. You've got to be very clear on that. Unless you're Elon Musk, and then you can just ask for billions and they'll give it to
All right, when it comes to evidence of product fit, market fit, potential for actual revenue, um, do you two look at SIBR funding, SIDR funding as good evidence that somebody is at least on the right path with their company and their approach?
which SIBR is be the first question I would ask you. SIBR phase one, SIDR phase one, no, because that's basically just a hunting license. If
Okay.
you get a phase two or you're graduating from a phase two, now you're
Mhm.
actually working with customers and they're saying, I like what you have that's going into this and there's
Mhm.
potential there. So it really comes down to where you are in that. Same thing with many of the other grants, right? Initial exploration grants are just really a chance for you to go out and cast around and find customers. The once you get to the development grants or you get to SIBR phase two, now you're talking about customer engaged. So those, yes. The others, it shows me that there's a customer who's interested in your arena, but not necessarily in your tech.
Mhm.
Ron, you want to add anything there?
No, Rich said he said it all, because
All right.
basically, what those types of things, you can't validate that market unless you have somebody that says, here's a purchase order, and I'm going to purchase this from you at this price. Now that's a full 100% validation of the market of what you have and what you have to sell. So therefore, yes, it will take time. It tells us that you've done some homework and maybe you have some more homework to do.
And we look, investors love non-dilutive funding, right? Getting grants and SIBRs and SIDRs and stuff like that, which you don't give up your equity for. Those are phenomenal starting points. They're a great
Hmm.
introduction to key customers over time. And so we think those are hugely positive. Just don't have that be the only thing
The
that you do.
things that you do. Right.
Okay. We talked a little bit early on about sectors in commercial space that you guys saw as promising for the future. Are there ones that you see that are maybe not so good for commercial space, but would be primarily of interest to DoD?
Well,
Things that go boom.
things that go boom. Yeah. As far as to DoD, you have to look at it, Rich. You've got some spaceships back there. We're gonna have to have a little more than rocks to throw at them. Okay. There's no, even if it's just moving asteroids, out of your way, you got to be able, to get things out of your way. So yeah. So with the DoD, there are several things that are going to be more specific to what their needs are, and not necessarily, that we're sold back here. So really, anything that basically that deals strictly with defense, is going to be for that. It can be used on Earth, but it definitely, would have space type things. That's fundable. Is if that's what if they're asking, is that fundable? Yes, that is. But Rich said it best: do your homework, know
Yeah.
which VC you're talking to. You're going to have you have VCs. We are a specialized group, but within the group there are specialties within the VC industry. There are those who specialize specifically in that area.
I think there's a bit of a misnomer. There is not a technology that the US DoD is not interested in. There just isn't. Everything from educational technologies, they run one of the largest school systems in the entire United States. Right? So they're interested in pretty much everything. I would think that when you're looking at DoD in particular, the two things that they really are focused on is precision. Right? So how granularly refined, et cetera, can you make, whether you're using a sensor technology is going into it, and then the security and survivability of things that are going on. DoD's criteria for security for things that they do, both data security and of the devices themselves, is much higher than other places. And their survivability, they have to think of things getting into conflict. So they put additional controls and additional requirements around the redundancy you have to build into systems and things like that because they're designed for potential conflict, right? But generally speaking, the technology you have fits very well to defense communities. There is no separation in most countries in the world between their space industry commercially and their space industry government. The US does that, but is always aware of both sides.
Yeah. We've got just about 7 minutes left. So I'm going to ask both of you to, in addition to all the good advice that you guys have given our attendees today, what additional advice would you say for somebody who's in the early stages of their commercial space company? Things to look out for, things to avoid, things to make their company as successful as possible, apart from the 100-year plan and apart from doing your homework.
I would say look beyond just being able to cash out and look at the impact. I didn't really, I kind of mentioned it, but didn't really get into it in depth. And that is, you know, why are you here? One of Rich touched on it a bit. He says, why should I invest in you versus invest in somebody else? But you need to really poll within yourself, within your team, within your company, within the body of work that you're trying to do. Why? What is it going to do? What would happen? And think about, here's another way to think about that. And that is, if we did not have the technology that you're trying to develop, what would the world look like? If we did not have that, if we didn't have cell phones, what would the world look like? If we didn't have cars, what would the world look like? If we don't have the technology that I'm trying to develop, this is what the world would look like, this is what our lives would look like. And when you can address that, now it begins to make absolute sense why. And it begins to give you a deeper why you should be the one, or why you should someone should invest in you, be it an angel investor, a VC investor, or what have you, and just why the world would even want to look at your product or service.
Great. Thank you, Rich.
I think for me, it's two things. It's know yourself, right? You have to nail your messaging, right? You have to be able to communicate your vision in a way that will connect other people. So you have to know yourself very well. And the one that I think people have a tendency to ignore, and it's really critical from the earliest days, is own yourself. Make sure you protect your IP. Make sure you patent what's patentable. Make sure you take at least general precautions to protect what's there. The worst thing that can happen to you is when you get down the path and you've talked to an investor, and when they dig into it, they find out somebody else has undercut your thing because you didn't patent it, or you don't own the pieces within the company, or you don't have the rights to some of the stuff that's going there, because investors and even customers will walk away from you because they can't. Right? They cannot invest in you if you do not own yourself. So making sure that you protect that all of that the ideas and concepts you've come up with through patents and copyrights and all of those things that are going into it, or if you're leveraging other patented technologies, make sure that you've gotten the rights to utilize those things. Those are absolutely critical for you as a company to survive, but also for me as an investor to be able to invest in you, and for a customer, whether it's a government customer or a commercial customer, to be able to buy from you. They have to know that that piece is protected. So make sure from the earliest days you protect, protect, protect.
Okay. All right. So we've got just a couple of minutes. I'm actually going to go ahead and wrap everything up right now because, quite frankly, you guys are both really good at telling stories about how the VC community works and why all of our attendees should pay attention to it. So actually, I'm going to just go ahead and stop right there. Thank you both very much for taking some time out of your afternoons to talk to our attendees. I definitely appreciate it, and I'm sure that they do as well. For our attendees, thank you for signing in and listening to these two very experienced individuals talk about how you can maximize your chances when you go in front of people like them. So thank you very much for that. One of the questions that we had that we didn't get to was, will this webinar be available? Yes, it was recorded. It will be available on the NTA website in just a little while. So keep an eye out for that in case you wanted to look for it again. Thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time today. We definitely appreciate it and hope to see you again on future webinars. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank
Bye.
you.